let's talk about the semi-finals of the BookTube Prize. So, hello, welcome back. My name is Gemma. Over the last 2 months, I have been reading the 6 books in Group A of the non-fiction category for the BookTube Prize. And so I thought I'd come on and tell you what I thought of them and how I ranked them. As this video goes live, the results of the BookTube Prize would have come out yesterday. So I will link the BookTube Prize channel below so you can go and check out all of the books that went through to the final, and I will include a section at the end which is my reaction to that. So what was my experience of reading the 6 non-fiction books in Group A? I am going to be completely honest, and I really struggled with this. I am definitely more of the fiction reader. My reading is probably about 15% non-fiction, so I do enjoy it. I like to sprinkle it throughout my reading experience, but to read 6 non-fiction in 2 months is a lot for me, and I found it too much non-fiction for my personal reading tastes. Also, within my group, the 6 books that were in my group, every single one of them was written by a white American author. And so, though the topics were very broad, they were all very American focused, and it just wasn't diverse enough for me. I like diversity in my reading. I like to hear about other cultures and other viewpoints. So to have 6 white American viewpoints in a very short amount of time didn't really float my boat. So those 2 things considered, I probably will not be volunteering to do non-fiction again, but it was an experience. It taught me something about my own reading tastes, and I did find some fantastic books. So with that sort of caveat out of the way, I asked myself as I was reading the books and as I was submitting my rankings, how on earth do you rank non-fiction when the subject matter means that you will enjoy a book or not to a lesser or greater extent? The 6 topics were vastly different, though I was interested in all of them. But how do you not just pick your favourite topic? Do you see what I mean? So I have tried to be a little bit more objective in the way that it was written and the styling and the narrative voice if it had one, and taken all of that into consideration with my rankings as well. So with the 6 books that I had, there was one that I didn't like, that I didn't go with, that was sort of in 2-star territory. There was one that I absolutely adored, which shocked me, and was 5-star territory, and I will be highly recommending everybody to pick that up. And then we had sort of the middle 4 books, one of which was a 3-star for me, and the others were all 4-star, so those 3 were quite difficult to tease apart. But yeah, I'll explain more as we go. Let's start with my number 6. So in at 6th position, I have The Groundbreaking by Scott Elsworth. And this is a historical non-fiction book looking at the Tulsa Race Massacre, which occurred in the 60s, I think. This was the first one I read, so I'm a bit sketchy on some of the details. And was basically covered up by the police, and the extent of the deaths and what happened was very much kept under wraps until relatively recently. So that for me was a very interesting topic, and I appreciated the information in the book around that event. However, the writing style for me, I really did not gel with. It felt more like the author was trying to tell his story of writing the book rather than he was trying to tell the story of the event, and I found it quite jarring. There was also quite a lot in it where he would describe the appearance of people who weren't really important to the narrative, and I was like, I don't really care what that random scientist is that's in the book for 3 pages. I don't care what they look like. That's just filler. So yeah, I found this quite difficult, and I would have DNF'd this had it not been a BookTube Prize book. So that was quite an easy one to put in 6th position. In 5th place is a book that I actually thought was going to rank a lot higher, and that is Facing the Mountain by Daniel James Brown. So This one looked at the Asian American experience, or more specifically the Japanese American experience, following the events of Pearl Harbor in World War II. And I really enjoy reading about World War II, specifically from perspectives that are not much heard from. So that really interested me. Then I discovered that the author was a white American author, and that irritated me a little bit. Obviously, he did lots and lots of research, and there's nothing to say that a white author can't write about that stuff, but it just took away from the impact for me. And I thought that this book was going to be more around the internment camps and how that affected people. And there was some of that in there, but it really did focus on this one particular platoon of Asian American soldiers fighting in Italy. And there was a lot of detail around weaponry and the geographical landscape in Italy, and it just felt really, really dense. So like I say, again, it did educate me. It taught me things that I didn't know before I picked up the book, so I do appreciate that. But this book was over 500 pages, and it did not need to be. I think especially for a non-fiction, if you're going to have a really chunky non-fiction like that, then don't make it a textbook. I'm not interested in reading textbooks. So yeah, I was pretty disappointed, because I thought this had potential to be my number one pick, and it just didn't deliver really for me. This was a 3-star, so it was fine, but probably not worth 500 pages of reading, to be completely honest. Okay, in at number 4 was the only book that I had read prior to being selected as a judge for this round, and that was Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. And this book looked at the Sackler dynasty, and the Sacklers were the people who brought and marketed OxyContin on the US market quite dangerously, to the point where it caused obviously the current opioid crisis. And I very much enjoyed this book. It was very, very well written. It had lots of detail in. I was very, very interested in how the Sacklers sort of pieced up their business to avoid legislation, and the way that they marketed things to doctors. And yeah, it was, in a lot of ways, what the Sacklers did was very clever in a horrific way. And yeah, I thought it was really, really, really good book. My criticism of this is similar to my criticism of Facing the Mountain, in that it did have quite a lot of filler in it. There was, in particular, I remember one chapter where it talked for the whole chapter about one of the Sackler family's affinity to art and how he bought up loads of artwork and things like this. And it didn't need a whole chapter. It could have been covered in like a paragraph. So, and again, as one of the largest books on this list at over 500 pages, it just had too much filler in for me that wasn't really required. That said, I do highly recommend this book. It was a 4-star read. I really, really liked it, but it was just a bit dense in places. In third position, we have Under a White Sky by Elizabeth Kolbert. So this one was really interesting. So this is a science book, and this basically looks at all the ways that humanity over the years have fucked up the planet, and all of the things we're now trying to do to unfuck it. So it was looking at science, really, about the science that caused issues with the climate. It does focus quite a lot on climate and ecosystems and those sorts of things, and how we're trying to use science now to correct what we did wrong. It's split into 3 parts: down the river, into the wild, and up in the air. So we look at some of the issues around water and the sea, and then we look at issues to do with like nature, and then we look at sort of climate change issues. And it was fascinating. It was presented almost like a set of case studies. There was sort of 2 or 3 case studies per section, which made it really, really digestible. It does have pictures and diagrams and things in as well, which also helped to sort of understand what you were reading, particularly if it was getting quite scientific. But if I'm honest, at no point did I feel like it was bamboozling me with science. I thought this was a fantastic book. It just gave you enough information to understand the issue and the things that people are trying to do to counteract those issues, and for you to go away and obviously learn more if you want to. There was a particular section in this book which was quite relevant to what I do in my work, and I was so intrigued by it that I have actually got a meeting with my global team next week to discuss it as a project. So yeah, this is why you should read in your free time, because it can help you with work. But yeah, I highly recommend, if you have any interest in the planet, give this one a go, because it was really well written. Then at number 2 we have American Baby by Gabrielle Glasser. So this one looks at the US adoption system in America in the 50s, 60s, sort of into the 70s, but more in the 50s and 60s. And we follow a specific case here of a young Jewish woman who fell pregnant as a teenager and was forced to give up her baby. And we follow her journey and her son's journey as they sort of try to find each other in a system that doesn't allow for that. And it was heartbreaking. It was really heartbreaking to read. It was well researched, but I think the reason I liked this book so much was it did come across as a sort of narrative. So you could have been reading fiction, but you weren't. But there were bits and pieces in it, references to other laws and other cases that obviously built on the arguments that Glasser was trying to make. But it was really, really well written, and I was so invested, particularly in Margaret's story, the mother. She went through a hell of a lot, and yeah, it's akin to sort of what happened in Irish adoption cases. And yeah, it very much focused on the Jewish experience because Margaret was Jewish. That was quite interesting to read about as well, because it's a religion I don't know so much about. But yeah, I would absolutely recommend this book if you're looking for a good non-fiction and you're interested in this sort of topic. But yeah, brilliantly written. And this one also had some lovely pictures in it to sort of add to your experience of the book. So at number 1, I was expecting this to be my number 6, and that's A Swim in the Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. So I read Lincoln in the Bardo, which is one of George Saunders' fictional works, a couple of years ago, and absolutely detested it. So I was a little trepidatious, I'm not going to lie, a little bit trepidatious going into his non-fiction. But this book is really I can't actually remember the subtitle, but it's like a masterclass in Russian short stories. So George Saunders is a lecturer at an American university, I forget which one, and he teaches creative writing. And so within this book we're given, I think it's 7 short stories written by Russian authors. There's Tolstoy, Chekhov, Gogol and Turgenev. And I don't like short stories either, so that was another reason I thought I wasn't going to like this. But he gives you these short stories and then he dissects them, and he says what the author was trying to do and the mechanisms he used to draw the reader in. And it was just really fascinating to read and dissect these stories. Even though I didn't like all of them, there was one in particular that I did like, and that was Master and Man by Leo Tolstoy. So if you're looking for a good short story, I really like that one, and it makes me quite excited to try and pick up some Tolstoy, probably next year now, let's be honest. But yeah, it was really good. But the way that George Saunders spoke to the reader was fantastic. You really felt like he was talking to you. He also referred to the reader as she, which is a minor point, but I don't think I've ever seen that in a book. And it was quite nice to acknowledge that some people reading books are female. It was lovely. But yeah, it was remarkable, and I absolutely adored the experience of reading both the short stories and George Saunders' commentary around it, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. If you enjoy fiction, if you enjoy reading, if you enjoy writing, then you will get a lot out of this. Obviously, these lectures are sort of designed for people who want to be writers, but I think you get a lot out of it as a reader, particularly if you like to be quite critical in your reading and analyse what you're reading. Double thumbs up. It was a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece, one of the best non-fictions I've ever read. So yeah, if for no other reason than reading that book, it was worth the experience. So yeah, so those are my rankings. You will see me very shortly. I will see you tomorrow with my thoughts on the results of this group in the BookTube Prize. Okay, so it is Monday the 1st of August today, and the results came out just a few hours ago, and yeah, 1 out of 3. So the winners that went through were Facing the Mountain, Empire of Pain and Under a White Sky. So Under a White Sky I ranked 3rd and wanted to go through. I'm not at all surprised that Empire of Pain went through to the final. I thought that was a fantastic book, and I'm not at all disappointed to see it there. Facing the Mountain, you've heard my thoughts on that, so I'm a bit disappointed that that won out over the Saunders or the Glasser, but you know, that's how these things go. But I'm still really glad that I read those 2 books, which I definitely wouldn't have done without the BookTube Prize. So yeah, overall a bit like, oh, but seems my taste in reading is quite different to the other judges of this category. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, what you thought. If you're interested in seeing how I ranked the translated fiction round earlier on in the year, I'll leave that video here, and I will see you very soon with another one. Bye guys.